The brutal Texas heat shimmered off the asphalt like liquid fire as Detective Lisa Williams pulled into her driveway after another grueling 12-hour shift. The dashboard thermometer read 104 degrees, and the late afternoon sun showed no mercy to the small suburban neighborhood nestled on the outskirts of Cedar Creek. Lisa's police cruiser ticked and groaned as it cooled, the engine finally getting a respite from patrolling the endless highways that stretched across this unforgiving corner of the Lone Star State. 3-year-old Marcus Williams pressed his face against the living room window, his bright hazel eyes tracking his mother's every movement as she gathered her equipment bag and radio. He didn't wave or call out. Marcus had never spoken a single word in his 3 years of life. Autism had built invisible walls around his mind, trapping his thoughts and emotions in a silent prison that no amount of love or therapy had been able to unlock. But his eyes, those incredibly expressive eyes, spoke volumes to anyone patient enough to listen. Lisa kicked off her heavy boots at the front door and immediately felt the blessed relief of air conditioning washing over her sweat-dampened uniform. The house was quiet, except for the gentle hum of the cooling system working overtime against the oppressive heat. Her husband David wouldn't be home from his construction job for another hour, leaving her alone with Marcus during what therapists called the witching hour, the challenging time when autistic children often became overwhelmed and unpredictable. "Hey, baby boy," she whispered softly, approaching Marcus with the careful, measured movements she'd learned to use around him. Sudden sounds or gestures could send him into a meltdown that might last for hours. Marcus turned toward her voice, but didn't make eye contact. He rarely did, preferring to focus on objects rather than faces. In his small hands, he clutched his favorite toy police car, the paint worn off from countless hours of repetitive play. Lisa changed out of her uniform into comfortable shorts and a t-shirt, then led Marcus to the backyard where his sandbox waited under the shade of a massive oak tree. The backyard was Marcus's sanctuary, a carefully controlled environment where he could play safely while Lisa kept watch. She had installed a 6-foot privacy fence around the entire perimeter with child-proof locks on both gates. Or so she thought. The sandbox was Marcus's obsession. He would spend hours arranging and rearranging small toys in precise patterns that made sense only to him. Today, he lined up his collection of miniature vehicles in perfect rows, occasionally making soft humming sounds that served as his version of engine noises. These were the closest things to vocalizations that Marcus ever produced, and Lisa treasured each one like precious gems. While Marcus played, Lisa stepped into the kitchen to start dinner preparations. Through the large window above the sink, she maintained a clear view of the backyard, a habit ingrained through 3 years of hypervigilant parenting. She could see Marcus's dark hair gleaming in the dappled sunlight as he meticulously moved his toys, completely absorbed in his private world. The phone rang just as Lisa was pulling ingredients from the refrigerator. The caller ID showed her partner's name, Detective Rodriguez, probably calling about tomorrow's court testimony in the Patterson case. Lisa grabbed the cordless phone and answered, while continuing to watch Marcus through the window. "Williams here," she said, cradling the phone between her shoulder and ear as she pulled vegetables from the crisper drawer. "Lisa, sorry to bother you at home, but the defense attorney wants to reschedule your testimony." Something about a conflict with their expert witness, Rodriguez's voice carried the familiar exhaustion that came with their demanding caseload. "When do they want to move it to?" Lisa asked, turning away from the window for just a moment to grab a notepad from the counter. It was a split second and no more than 5 heartbeats, but in that brief instant, everything changed. "They're asking for Friday morning instead of Thursday." "I know it's your day off, but..." Lisa's blood turned to ice. The sandbox was empty. The carefully arranged toys remained in their perfect rows, but Marcus had vanished as if he'd simply evaporated into the sweltering air. The phone slipped from her nerveless fingers, clattering to the kitchen floor as Rodriguez's voice became a distant buzz. Marcus. The scream tore from her throat as she burst through the back door, her bare feet hitting the scorching concrete. She spun in frantic circles, searching every corner of the yard, behind every bush and tree. The shed was locked, the pool area was gated off, and the house showed no signs of entry. Then she saw at the back gate, the one that led to the wilderness preserve, hung slightly ajar. The child-proof lock, which she'd tested 100 times, had somehow failed. Or maybe Marcus, in his mysterious way, had figured out how to manipulate it. Children with autism often displayed unexpected problem-solving abilities, especially when pursuing something that captured their intense focus. Beyond that gate lay thousands of acres of untamed Texas wilderness, a brutal landscape of thorny mesquite, hidden ravines, and abandoned mine shafts left over from the area's mining days. Rattlesnakes coiled in the shade of scrub oaks, wild boars rooted through the underbrush, and steep drop-offs waited to trap unwary travelers. It was a place where experienced hikers carried emergency beacons and told someone their planned route before venturing out alone. Lisa's police training kicked in as she grabbed her radio and cell phone, calling in the emergency while simultaneously racing toward the gate. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she realized that her silent, vulnerable son had disappeared into a landscape that could kill a grown man, let alone a 3-year-old child who wouldn't cry for help or respond to his own name. The sun was already beginning its descent toward the western horizon, and Lisa knew that Texas heat was deadly, but Texas cold could be just as brutal. Desert nights brought temperatures that could drop 40 degrees, and Marcus was wearing only light summer clothes. As the first sirens wailed in the distance, Lisa Williams, veteran detective, trained law enforcement officer, protector of the innocent, crumbled against the gatepost. Somewhere in that vast, merciless wilderness, her silent son was facing dangers beyond imagination, and all her training, all her expertise, felt utterly useless against a mother's worst nightmare. The wail of sirens shattered the evening quiet as emergency vehicles converged on the Williams residence like moths, drawn to a deadly flame. Sheriff Jake Morrison arrived first, his weathered face grim as he took in the scene. Detective Lisa Williams, one of his most capable officers, reduced to a trembling mother, clutching her son's favorite toy police car against her chest like a talisman against disaster. "How long?" Morrison asked, his voice cutting through the chaos of arriving personnel. 23 minutes, Lisa whispered, her training automatically providing the precise timeline even as her heart shattered. "Maybe 25. I lost track during the phone call. Each passing second felt like an eternity, and she knew that in cases involving missing children, especially those with special needs, the first hour was absolutely critical." Within minutes, the quiet suburban street transformed into a command center. Fire trucks blocked both ends of the road, their red lights painting the gathering dusk in ominous colors. Search and rescue teams unloaded equipment with military precision thermal imaging cameras, portable floodlights, communication gear, and medical supplies. The local volunteer fire department arrived with their specialized wilderness rescue truck, followed by the county's helicopter unit, setting up a temporary landing zone in the nearby school parking lot. Captain Sarah Chun of the Search and Rescue Division studied topographical maps spread across the hood of her vehicle, marking off sectors with different colored pens. "This is bad," she muttered to Morrison. "We've got approximately 12,000 acres of wilderness preserve, plus another 8,000 acres of private ranch land beyond that. Terrain includes everything from dense mesquite thickets to limestone cliffs with 60-foot drop-offs." The statistics were sobering. The preserve was a labyrinth of animal trails that led nowhere, dried creek beds that could trap a small child, and abandoned structures from the area's mining boom that created deadly pitfalls. Rattlesnakes were particularly active during the cooler evening hours, and the preserve was home to a healthy population of wild boars massive, aggressive animals that could weigh over 300 pounds and had been known to attack when surprised. As darkness began creeping across the landscape, the temperature started its nightly plunge. While the day had been brutally hot, desert climates were notorious for dramatic temperature swings. The overnight low was forecast to drop into the mid-50s, potentially fatal for a small child wearing only summer clothes. "We need the dogs," Morrison said, watching volunteers organize into search teams. "Where's our K-9 unit?" "Officer Martinez and his bloodhound are en route," Shen replied, but her expression remained troubled. "Problem is, bloodhounds work best with fresh scent trails. After 6 hours in this heat, with the wind patterns we've had today, ... double quotes, she didn't finish the sentence. Everyone understood the implications. Detective Rodriguez arrived with David Williams, Marcus's father, who looked like he'd aged 10 years in the 30 minutes since receiving Lisa's hysterical phone call. A heavy equipment operator, David was built like a linebacker, but seeing him crumble as he took in the massive search operation was heartbreaking. His work-roughened hands shook as he handed over more of Marcus's clothing to the dog handlers. "He's so little," David whispered to no one in particular. "And he doesn't understand danger. If he sees water, he'll walk right in. If he gets scared, he hides instead of calling for help." His voice broke as the full horror of the situation hit him. Their son was lost in a wilderness that challenged experienced outdoorsmen, and Marcus had the survival instincts of a toddler with zero communication skills. The search teams fanned out with systematic precision. Team Alpha took the main trail heading east toward the limestone caves. Team Bravo tackled the dense mesquite country to the north, where visibility was limited to just a few feet in any direction. Team Charlie drew the worst assignment. The cliff areas where rocky outcroppings created hundreds of places where a small body could fall and disappear forever. Officer Martinez arrived with Sergeant, a 7-year-old bloodhound with an impressive record of successful finds. But as Sergeant worked the scent trail from Marcus's sandbox, his behavior told an ominous story. The trail led directly to the gate, and seemed to scatter in multiple directions, as if Marcus had wandered aimlessly, following no particular path or destination. "Kids with autism don't follow normal patterns," Dr. Jennifer Walsh explained to the incident commanders. A child psychologist who specialized in autism spectrum disorders. She'd been called in to help predict Marcus's likely behavior. They might be attracted to water, bright objects, or specific textures. But they also tend to hide when they hear people calling their names. It's a defensive response to overwhelming stimuli. Information sent a chill through the search teams. Instead of moving toward rescue sounds, Marcus would likely move away from them, deeper into danger. Every shout of his name might actually be driving him further from safety. As full darkness fell, the search took on an almost surreal quality. Powerful floodlights carved harsh white tunnels through the black wilderness, creating a stark contrast between brilliant illumination and impenetrable shadow. The helicopter's thermal imaging camera swept back and forth, its operator searching for the heat signature of a small body among the cooling rocks and vegetation. Radio chatter filled the night air with location reports and negative findings. Team Alpha, Sector 7 negative. Team Bravo approaching the creek, bed no contact. Charlie Team, requesting additional lighting at GPS coordinates. ... double quotes. Lisa paced behind the command vehicle, unable to sit still despite exhaustion. Every few minutes, she would grab the radio and plead, "Marcus, baby, it's Mommy. Please make a sound, please." But the wilderness swallowed her words without echo, offering only the distant call of coyotes and the rustle of wind through thorny branches. By midnight, the temperature had dropped to 62 degrees and was still falling. Hypothermia became a real concern, especially for a child Marcus's size. Search teams rotated in shifts, but the darkness limited their effectiveness. Dawn couldn't come fast enough, but everyone knew that with each passing hour, their chances of finding Marcus alive were diminishing with the temperature. In the distance, a coyote howled a sound that made every parent in the command center think thoughts too terrible to voice aloud. Dawn broke across the Texas wilderness like a reluctant witness, casting long shadows that seemed to mock the exhausted search teams. The overnight temperature had plummeted to 54 degrees, dangerously cold for a 3-year-old wearing only a light t-shirt and shorts. 14 hours had passed since Marcus disappeared, and the grim mathematics of survival were working against them with each tick of the clock. Detective Lisa Williams hadn't slept. She couldn't. Dark circles shadowed her eyes as she clutched a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. Her gaze fixed on the command center's activity board, where search sectors were methodically being marked as cleared, each red X representing another area where her son wasn't found. Another piece of hope chipped away. Sheriff Morrison rubbed his weathered face, feeling every one of his 58 years. He'd overseen dozens of search operations, but this one was different. This wasn't just about finding a missing child. This was about one of his own officers watching her world crumble in real time. The weight of that responsibility pressed down on him like a physical force. "Sir, we've got a specialist incoming," Deputy Foster announced, approaching with renewed energy. "Canine unit from Austin. Handler's name is Officer Daniel Hayes, and his dog ... double quotes." Foster paused to check his notes. "German Shepherd named Rex. Apparently, this team has an exceptional record with missing persons." Morrison nodded grimly. They needed exceptional. Standard search protocols were failing, and time was running out faster than water through cupped hands. 20 minutes later, a dust-covered police SUV rolled up to the command center. Officer Daniel Hayes stepped out, and immediately, several things became apparent. First, he moved with the quiet confidence of someone who'd seen the worst and somehow managed to keep finding reasons for hope. Second, when he opened the vehicle's rear compartment, the German Shepherd that emerged was unlike any police dog most of the searchers had ever seen. Rex was magnificent, a perfect specimen of German Shepherd breeding, with intelligent amber eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. But it wasn't his size or bearing that set him apart. It was the way he carried himself. Where most police dogs were high energy and eager to please, Rex possessed an almost supernatural focus, as if he understood that lives depended on his abilities. 14 hours? Hayes asked Morrison, his voice carrying no judgment, only professional assessment. 14 hours, 23 minutes, Lisa interjected, appearing at Morrison's shoulder. Her detective's training made her precise even in crisis. No confirmed sightings. Child is 3 years old, nonverbal autism, approximately 32 pounds. She handed Hayes a sealed evidence bag containing Marcus's pajama shirt. "This is the freshest scent article we have." Hayes studied Lisa's face, recognizing the particular agony of a parent watching helplessly while strangers searched for their child. He'd seen it too many times, and it never got easier. "Ma'am, I need you to understand Rex is exceptional, but the conditions aren't ideal. Heat, time, wind patterns, multiple contaminated search areas, ... double quotes." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "But if your son can be found, Rex will find him." The German Shepherd sat at perfect attention beside Hayes, but his eyes were already scanning the terrain, nostrils flaring as he processed hundreds of scent signatures, carried on the morning breeze. Rex had been trained for this specific type of search missing persons in wilderness conditions, and his record spoke for itself. 47 successful finds in 6 years of service, including 13 children. Hayes opened the evidence bag and held Marcus's shirt near Rex's nose. The dog's response was immediate and intense, His entire body language shifted from alert attention to focused determination. Rex circled the shirt twice, then moved to the gate where Marcus had disappeared, his powerful nose working the ground in expanding spirals. Most dogs would be confused by now, Hayes explained to the gathered searchers. Too many scent trails, too much contamination from search teams, too much time elapsed. But Rex ... He watched his partner work with obvious pride. Rex doesn't just follow scent trails. He thinks. He processes information and makes decisions. Rex suddenly stopped circling and looked directly at Hayes, his amber eyes conveying unmistakable communication. The dog had found something, not the boy himself, but a direction, a possibility that other dogs had missed. "He's got a line," Hayes announced, and immediately the atmosphere around the command center shifted. Exhausted searchers straightened, radio chatter increased, and Lisa felt her heart hammer against her ribs with something she'd been afraid to feel: hope. Rex began moving with purposeful strides toward the northeast sector, an area that had been searched twice during the night, but declared negative both times. The terrain in that direction was particularly challenging. Dense mesquite gave way to rocky outcroppings, which led to a series of limestone cliffs riddled with caves and crevices. "That's the Devil's Backbone area," Captain Sean said, consulting her topographical map. "We put 2 teams through there, but visibility is limited and ... She stopped, realizing what she was about to say. The area was so dangerous that search teams had been instructed to stay together and stick to established paths. A 3-year-old wouldn't have those limitations or that survival instinct. Hayes clipped a long lead to Rex's harness and signaled for the search teams to follow at a distance. "Everyone stays back," he ordered. "Rex needs to work without interference." The German Shepherd was already moving at a steady trot, his nose alternating between ground scent and air currents, following an invisible trail that only he could detect. As they moved deeper into the wilderness, the terrain became increasingly treacherous. Thorny branches caught at clothing, loose rocks shifted underfoot, and the morning sun was already beginning to heat the air toward another scorching day. But Rex moved with unwavering confidence, occasionally pausing to recalibrate his direction, but never showing doubt about his destination. "How does he do it?" Lisa asked, hiking beside Hayes, as they followed the dog deeper into terrain that seemed impossible for a small child to navigate. Hayes watched his partner work, admiration clear in his voice. Experience, training, and something else. Something that can't be taught. He paused as Rex suddenly changed direction, angling toward a particularly rugged section of cliff face. Rex doesn't just find missing people. He finds them because he cares about finding them. And sometimes, that makes all the difference. The sun climbed mercilessly toward its zenith as Rex led the search party deeper into the Devil's Backbone, a notorious section of wilderness that had claimed the lives of 3 experienced hikers over the past decade. The limestone cliffs rose like ancient sentinels, their surfaces pockmarked with caves and crevices that could hide a small body forever. Officer Hayes checked his GPS. They were now 2.3 miles from the Williams house, farther than anyone had imagined a 3-year-old could travel through such brutal terrain. Rex's behavior had shifted again. The German Shepherd's confident trot had become more deliberate, more focused. His nose worked constantly between the rocky ground and the air currents that swirled unpredictably around the cliff faces. Every few yards, he would pause, circle, and then surge forward with renewed determination. Hayes recognized the pattern. Rex was closing in on something significant. "Jesus Christ," muttered Captain Shun, following 50 yards behind with the main search team. How did a 3-year-old make it this far? The path they were following, if it could be called a path, was barely navigable for experienced adults. Loose scree shifted with every step, thorny mesquite tore at exposed skin, and the increasing elevation made breathing difficult in the thinning air. Detective Lisa Williams pushed forward, ignoring the cuts on her arms and the burning in her lungs. 16 hours. Her son had been missing for 16 hours in conditions that would challenge a survival expert. The mathematics were brutal. Dehydration, hypothermia, wildlife, falls, snake bites, any one of a dozen factors could have killed Marcus by now. But Rex's unwavering confidence kept her moving, step by agonizing step. Suddenly, Rex stopped. Not paused, stopped completely, his entire body rigid with attention. His amber eyes fixed on something ahead, and a low whine escaped his throat. It wasn't distress. It was recognition. Hayes felt his pulse quicken as he moved carefully toward his partner, scanning the rocky terrain for any sign of what had captured Rex's absolute focus. "There," Hayes whispered, pointing toward a narrow crevice between two massive limestone boulders. The opening was barely 3 feet wide and partially hidden by scrub brush, invisible, unless you knew exactly where to look. Rex sees something. The crevice led to what appeared to be a small cave system, carved by centuries of water erosion. Hayes pulled out his tactical flashlight and peered into the darkness. The beam revealed a narrow passage that opened into a larger chamber about 15 feet back. Fresh scratch marks on the rock walls suggested recent passage. Something small had squeezed through this opening. "Marcus?" Lisa called softly, her voice echoing strangely in the confined space. "Baby, it's Mommy. Are you in there?" Silence. Hayes signaled for the search team to maintain distance while he prepared to enter the cave. Cave rescues were among the most dangerous operations in search and rescue work. Unstable rocks, potential cave-ins, and limited maneuverability made every move potentially fatal. But Rex was already pushing toward the opening, his certainty overriding Hayes's caution. "If he's in there," Hayes said quietly to Lisa, "I need you to stay back until I assess the situation. Cave systems can be unstable, and if there's been a collapse, double quotes." He didn't finish the sentence, but Lisa understood. Her training as a detective had taught her about worst-case scenarios, and she forced herself to think professionally rather than emotionally. Hayes squeezed through the opening, with Rex close behind. The passage was tight, barely wide enough for his shoulders, and the rock was sharp enough to tear his uniform in several places. But after 15 feet of careful crawling, the passage opened into a chamber roughly the size of a small bedroom, with a ceiling high enough to stand upright. His flashlight beam swept across the cave floor, revealing scattered debris leaves, small rocks, and something that made his heart stop. Tiny sneaker prints in the dust, leading deeper into the cave system. "Lisa," he called back through the passage, his voice tight with controlled excitement. "We've got fresh tracks. Definitely a child." The cave extended further back, branching into several smaller passages. Hayes followed the clearest set of tracks, Rex padding silently beside him, both of them moving with the careful precision of hunters who knew their quarry was close. The air was cooler here, which could be good or bad protection from the heat, but potentially deadly cold for a small child in summer clothes. 20 feet deeper into the cave system, Hayes's flashlight beam illuminated something that made his breath catch. A small figure curled up in an alcove, partially hidden behind a fallen rock. Marcus Williams lay on his side, knees drawn up to his chest, eyes closed, perfectly still. "Found him!" Hayes shouted, his voice echoing through the cave system and carrying back to the search teams outside. "I've got him." Hayes approached carefully, his medical training taking over. Marcus was unconscious, but breathing shallow, rapid breaths that suggested dehydration and possible hypothermia. His skin was pale and cool to the touch, and his lips had a slight blue tinge that confirmed Hayes's fears about his core body temperature. But Marcus was alive. Rex approached the unconscious child with extraordinary gentleness, sniffing carefully before settling down beside the boy's still form. The German shepherd's body heat began warming the small space, and Hayes realized that Rex understood exactly what was needed. As Hayes began basic medical assessment, checking Marcus's pulse and breathing, the boy's eyes fluttered open. Instead of the terror Hayes expected when a child awakened to find strangers in a dark cave, something remarkable happened. Marcus looked directly at Rex, and his small hand moved slowly toward the dog's fur. Rex remained perfectly still, allowing the touch, and Marcus's breathing seemed to steady as his fingers found the comfort of warm fur. It was as if the boy recognized something in the German shepherd: a kindness, a protection, a connection that transcended the trauma of his ordeal. "Easy, buddy," Hayes whispered to Marcus. "We're here to take you home to Mommy." Outside the cave, Lisa Williams heard Hayes' shout and felt her knees buckle with relief, so intense it was physically overwhelming. 16 hours and 27 minutes after her son disappeared into the wilderness, Rex had found him alive against impossible odds. The miracle worker had delivered a miracle, and somewhere in the darkness of a limestone cave, a little boy was touching the fur of the dog who had saved his life. The antiseptic smell of Cedar Creek Children's Hospital couldn't mask the underlying tension that permeated the pediatric intensive care unit. Marcus Williams lay in the small hospital bed, looking impossibly tiny among the monitors and 4 lines that tracked his recovery from severe dehydration and mild hypothermia. His core body temperature had dropped to 94.2 degrees when the paramedics first assessed him in the cave, dangerously close to the threshold where organ failure becomes inevitable. Dr. Elizabeth Morgan, the hospital's chief pediatrician, studied Marcus's chart with the careful attention she reserved for her most challenging cases. "Physically, he's responding well," she told Lisa and David Williams, who hadn't left their son's bedside except when forced to by hospital policy. "His temperature is back to normal. We've corrected the dehydration, and there's no sign of infection from the cuts and scrapes. But ... But? Lisa prompted, though she already suspected what Dr. Morgan was about to say. The psychological trauma could be significant. 16 hours alone in a wilderness cave would be devastating for any 3-year-old. But for a child with autism... Dr. Morgan paused, choosing her words carefully. Children on the spectrum often struggle with processing traumatic experiences. We might see increased withdrawal, more severe communication challenges, possible regression in developmental milestones. What Dr. Morgan didn't mention, what had every staff member puzzled, was Marcus's remarkably calm demeanor since arriving at the hospital. Typically, autistic children in medical settings became overwhelmed by the sensory overload. Bright lights, constant noise, strangers touching them, unfamiliar smells. They expected tantrums, resistance to medical procedures, and the kind of distressed behavior that required sedation or restraints. Instead, Marcus lay quietly, his large hazel eyes tracking movement around the room with alert interest rather than fear. He tolerated the 4 insertion, blood draws, and physical examinations with a composure that seemed almost supernatural for a child who normally screamed during routine pediatric visits. The mystery deepened when Officer Hayes arrived for a welfare check, bringing Rex along despite hospital policies that typically prohibited animals in patient care areas. Dr. Morgan had made a special exception, partly because Hayes was technically conducting official police business, but mostly because she was curious about the bond that rescue workers had described between the boy and the German shepherd. The moment Rex padded quietly into Marcus's hospital room, the monitors told a story that left medical staff stunned. Marcus's heart rate, which had been elevated since admission, dropped immediately to normal ranges. His breathing became deeper and more relaxed. Most remarkably, he turned his head toward the dog and made direct eye contact, something he rarely did with humans, including his own parents. "This is unprecedented," whispered Dr. Sarah Chen, a pediatric neurologist who specialized in autism spectrum disorders. She'd been called in to consult on Marcus's case and was observing the interaction with scientific fascination. Children with autism typically avoid eye contact, especially during times of stress. But look at him. Marcus was not only making eye contact with Rex, he was communicating. Not with words, Marcus had never spoken, but with subtle gestures and expressions that the German Shepherd seemed to understand perfectly. When Marcus shifted uncomfortably in bed, Rex moved closer. When medical staff approached with equipment, Rex positioned himself between them and the child, not aggressively, but protectively. "It's like they're having a conversation," Lisa murmured, tears streaming down her face. She'd never seen her son so calm, so connected to another living being. How is this possible? Hayes, who had witnessed countless animal-human interactions during his career, found himself equally amazed. Rex has worked with traumatized victims before, but this ... He watched his partner settle carefully beside Marcus's bed, the dog's large head resting on the mattress within easy reach of the child's small hand. "I've never seen him respond to anyone like this." Dr. Chun pulled up a chair closer to the bed, her scientific mind racing with possibilities. "There's emerging research about the connection between certain animals and individuals with autism. Some theories suggest that animals communicate in ways that bypass the social complexities that typically challenge autistic individuals. But this level of apparent communication, ... double quotes. She paused, watching Marcus's fingers trace patterns in Rex's fur. This could be groundbreaking. The afternoon brought an unexpected development. Marcus, who had been listless and unresponsive to most stimuli since his rescue, began showing signs of increased awareness when Rex was present. His vital signs improved. He began accepting liquids more readily, and most significantly, he started making soft vocalizations, not words, but gentle humming sounds similar to those he made with his toy police cars at home. "Those are the sounds he makes when he's content," David explained to Dr. Chun. "We haven't heard them since ... double quotes." He couldn't finish the sentence. They hadn't heard Marcus's contented humming since before his autism diagnosis, when developmental regression had begun stealing away their little boy's emerging personality. By evening, the medical staff had documented something that challenged their understanding of both trauma recovery and autism therapy. Marcus's cortisol levels, indicators of stress, had dropped to lower than normal ranges when Rex was present. His sleep patterns, typically disrupted and restless, had Nessun with humans, reaching out to touch Rex's ears and nose with gentle curiosity. "We need to document this," Dr. Chun told Dr. Morgan during their evening rounds. "This could revolutionize our approach to autism therapy and trauma recovery. The therapeutic potential of this type of human-animal bond... She watched through the room's window as Marcus slept peacefully, one small hand resting on Rex's head. "We're witnessing something that could change everything we think we know about autism intervention." Hayes prepared to leave for the evening, but Rex showed unusual reluctance to move from Marcus's bedside. The dog had never before resisted leaving a scene, but something about this small boy had created a connection that transcended normal professional boundaries. "Rex doesn't want to leave," Hayes observed, gently tugging at his partner's leash. The German Shepherd looked back at the sleeping child with what could only be described as concern, a soft whine escaping his throat. "Bring him back tomorrow," Lisa said quietly. "Please. I don't understand what's happening, but Marcus needs this. He needs Rex." As the hospital settled into evening quiet, Marcus Williams slept deeper and more peacefully than he had since his autism diagnosis, his dreams perhaps filled with amber eyes and protective presence that had carried him safely from darkness into light. 3 weeks after Marcus Williams's miraculous rescue, the story had taken on a life of its own. Local news stations had picked up the initial report, but when cell phone footage of Marcus and Rex's hospital interactions surfaced, captured by a nurse and shared with permission from the family, the story exploded across social media platforms with the unstoppable force of modern viral content. The hashtag Marcus and Rex had garnered over 2 million posts on various platforms. Major news networks were calling for interviews. The video of 3-year-old Marcus gently petting Rex while the German Shepherd maintained perfect stillness beside the hospital bed had been viewed over 15 million times, bringing tears to viewers across the globe who recognized something pure and healing in the unlikely friendship. Sheriff Jake Morrison found himself fielding calls from as far away as London and Tokyo, all wanting to know more about the boy who couldn't speak and the dog who seemed to understand him perfectly. The attention was overwhelming, but it had also created an opportunity that Morrison felt compelled to pursue. "We need to do this right," Morrison told his senior staff during the Monday morning briefing. "This isn't just about Rex. It's about recognizing the entire K9 program, the search and rescue teams, the volunteers, everyone who made that rescue possible." Captain Sarah Chun spread out preliminary ceremony plans across the conference table. "I've been coordinating with Judge Patricia Reynolds. She's agreed to host a formal recognition ceremony in the main courtroom at the county courthouse. Full honors for Rex, commendations for the search teams, and a chance for the community to celebrate something genuinely good." The logistics were more complex than anyone had initially anticipated. Media requests were pouring in from national outlets. CNN wanted to broadcast the ceremony live. The Today Show had requested exclusive interview rights with the Williams family. Publishers were offering book deals, and Hollywood agents were calling about movie rights. "This is getting out of hand," Lisa Williams told her husband David as they sat in their kitchen, surrounded by stacks of interview requests and media contracts. "I just want Marcus to have a normal life. All this attention, ... She gestured helplessly at the chaos of phone messages and email printouts covering their dining room table. But Marcus's response to the attention told a different story. The 3-year-old, who had been withdrawn and uncommunicative before his rescue, was showing remarkable changes. Daily visits from Rex had become the highlight of his routine, and his development team was documenting improvements that defied their previous understanding of autism progression. Dr. Sarah Chun had been conducting informal observations during Rex's visits, and her findings were nothing short of revolutionary. Marcus's social engagement scores have improved by 340% in 3 weeks, she explained to Lisa and David during a family meeting. His anxiety responses have virtually disappeared when Rex is present. Most significantly, he's beginning to demonstrate intentional communication, not verbal yet, but purposeful gesturing and eye contact. That suggests cognitive breakthroughs. The decision to proceed with the courthouse ceremony wasn't made lightly. Lisa's concerns about overwhelming Marcus were valid. Autistic children often struggled with crowds, loud noises, and unpredictable environments. But Officer Hayes had an idea that might make the difference. "What if we treat this as therapy rather than a ceremony?" Hayes suggested during a planning meeting with the Williams family. "We control the environment, limit the crowd size, and make Rex the focal point rather than Marcus. The boy doesn't have to perform or speak, he just has to be himself." Hayes had been thinking about the ceremony from Rex's perspective as well. The German Shepherd had become emotionally invested in Marcus's welfare in ways that transcended normal canine training. Rex would whine softly when their daily visits ended, and Hayes had caught his partner staring out the window during their patrol routes, as if hoping to catch a glimpse of the small boy who had captured his protective instincts. Judge Patricia Reynolds, a 30-year veteran of the bench known for her no-nonsense approach to justice, found herself surprisingly moved by the story. "In 30 years of legal proceedings, I've seen plenty of darkness," she told Morrison during their planning meeting. This is a chance to celebrate something that reminds us why we do this work, protecting the vulnerable, serving the community, believing in the possibility of miracles. The ceremony was scheduled for Thursday morning at 10 a.m. Media would be limited to pool coverage, with one camera operator and one photographer representing all outlets. The audience would be restricted to law enforcement personnel, rescue workers, family members, and a small group of community representatives. Dr. Chun worked with Marcus's occupational therapist to develop a preparation plan. They created a visual schedule showing Marcus exactly what would happen. Car ride, big room with people, Rex wearing a special collar, sitting in a chair, going home. They practiced in smaller groups, gradually increasing the number of people present during Rex's visits. The breakthrough came during a practice session in the hospital's conference room, when Rex entered wearing his ceremonial collar, a leather piece, adorned with commendation ribbons. Marcus's face lit up with the closest thing to a smile that his parents had seen since his autism regression began. The boy reached out to touch the ribbons, his fingers exploring the textures with obvious fascination. "He understands that this is special," Lisa whispered to David, tears streaming down her face. "Look at his face. He knows this is about Rex, and he's proud." As Thursday morning approached, anticipation built throughout Cedar Creek. Local businesses had put up signs supporting Marcus and Rex. The elementary school had organized a card-making project, with hundreds of children creating drawings of dogs and police officers. The fire department had volunteered to provide honor guard services, and the high school marching band had requested permission to play during Rex's entrance. But perhaps the most meaningful preparation came from Marcus himself. On Wednesday evening, during Rex's final practice visit, something unprecedented happened. As Hayes prepared to leave with Rex, Marcus stood up from his chair, walked directly to the German Shepherd, and wrapped his small arms around the dog's neck in the first spontaneous hug he had ever initiated. The moment was captured by David's phone camera, but no one needed documentation to understand its significance. Marcus Williams, the boy who couldn't speak, was about to tell the world exactly how he felt about the dog who had saved his life. The stage was set for a moment that would transform everyone who witnessed it. Thursday morning dawned with the crisp clarity that only comes after Texas storms have washed the air clean. The Cedar Creek County Courthouse, a stately limestone building that had presided over the community's legal affairs for nearly a century, buzzed with quiet anticipation. By 9:30 a.m., every available parking space within 3 blocks was occupied, despite the carefully controlled guest list. Inside the main courtroom, Judge Patricia Reynolds adjusted her robes and surveyed the scene with the practiced eye of someone who had overseen thousands of proceedings. But this morning felt different. The usual adversarial atmosphere of legal proceedings had been replaced by something rare in her courtroom: genuine celebration and community unity. The gallery was filled with an extraordinary assembly. Sheriff's deputies in dress uniforms sat alongside volunteer firefighters and EMP personnel. Search and rescue team members, some still bearing scratches and bruises from their efforts in the Devil's Backbone, occupied the front rows. Dr. Sarah Chun sat with other medical professionals who had been following Marcus's remarkable progress. Even the courthouse security guards had requested permission to attend, having been moved by the story that had captured their community's heart. At 9:45 a.m., Officer Daniel Hayes entered through the courthouse's main entrance with Rex at his side. The German Shepherd wore his ceremonial collar, polished to gleaming perfection, with ribbons representing his years of distinguished service. But today, Rex seemed different, more alert, more focused than Hayes had ever seen him. The dog's amber eyes constantly scanned the environment, and Hayes realized that Rex was looking for Marcus. "He knows," Hayes murmured to Captain Chun. "He knows this is about the boy." The Williams family arrived precisely at 9:50 a.m., having timed their entrance to minimize Marcus's exposure to overwhelming stimuli. David carried his son, while Lisa walked beside them, her hand gently resting on Marcus's back. The 3-year-old wore his best clothes, a small navy blazer and khaki pants that made him look impossibly young and vulnerable. As they entered the courtroom, a remarkable thing happened. The assembled crowd, which had been buzzing with quiet conversation, fell into spontaneous silence. Not the imposed quiet of formal proceedings, but the respectful hush that accompanies sacred moments. Everyone present understood they were about to witness something extraordinary. Marcus's initial reaction to the crowded courtroom was exactly what Dr. Chun had predicted. His small body tensed against his father's chest. His breathing became rapid and shallow, and his eyes darted frantically around the unfamiliar environment. The sensory overload of so many people, the formal setting, and the unusual circumstances triggered his typical autism response, withdrawal and distress. But then Rex appeared in his field of vision. The transformation was instantaneous and profound. Marcus's rigid posture relaxed, his breathing steadied, and his wandering gaze fixed on the German shepherd with laser-like focus. Rex, sensing the boy's presence, turned his head and made direct eye contact across the crowded courtroom. The connection between them was so palpable that several observers later described feeling like they were witnessing a private conversation conducted in a language beyond words. Judge Reynolds called the ceremony to order with unusual gentleness in our normally authoritative voice. We are gathered today to honor extraordinary service and to celebrate the bonds that make our community strong. Officer Hayes, please bring Rex forward for recognition. Hayes guided Rex to the center of the courtroom, where a small podium had been set up. The German shepherd sat at perfect attention, his training evident in every line of his powerful frame. Judge Reynolds read the citation that officially recognized Rex's distinguished service, but her words seemed secondary to the silent drama unfolding between the dog and the small boy in the gallery. Marcus had begun making soft vocalizations, the contented humming sounds that his parents recognized as expressions of deep happiness. The sounds carried clearly in the quiet courtroom, and several hardened law enforcement officers found themselves blinking back unexpected tears. At this time, Judge Reynolds announced, "I would like to invite the Williams family to join us as we honor the officer who brought their son home safely." David carried Marcus toward the front of the courtroom, Lisa walking beside them with visible apprehension. This was the moment they had all prepared for, but no amount of practice could predict how Marcus would respond to being the center of attention in such a formal setting. As they approached Rex, something magical began to happen. Marcus struggled in his father's arms, not with distress, but with purpose. His small hands reached toward Rex with unmistakable intent. David, understanding his son's wishes, carefully lowered Marcus to the floor beside the German shepherd. The courtroom held its collective breath. Marcus stood on unsteady legs, his small frame dwarfed by Rex's powerful presence. For a moment, he simply looked at the dog who had saved his life, his expression serious and contemplative in a way that seemed far beyond his 3 years. Then, in a clear voice that carried to every corner of the silent courtroom, Marcus spoke his first public words, "Thank you." The silence that followed lasted perhaps 3 heartbeats, long enough for the magnitude of the moment to register with everyone present. Then the courtroom erupted. Spontaneous applause thundered from the gallery. Grown men openly wept, and Judge Reynolds found herself dabbing at her eyes with a tissue that had appeared from somewhere. But the most powerful response came from Rex himself. The German shepherd, trained to remain stoically professional in all circumstances, broke protocol in the most beautiful way possible. He gently lowered his massive head and nuzzled Marcus's small hand, acknowledging the boy's words with the tenderness of a mother comforting her child. Marcus wrapped his arms around Rex's neck, burying his face in the dog's fur, and for a perfect moment, The packed courtroom witnessed pure love, transcending every barrier that autism had built around one small boy's heart. The applause continued for nearly 5 minutes, but neither Marcus nor Rex seemed aware of anything except each other. In that sacred space between boy and dog, a miracle had unfolded that would be remembered long after the formal citations were filed away, and the cameras stopped rolling. Judge Reynolds, her voice thick with emotion, spoke the words that everyone in the courtroom was thinking. Today, we have all been privileged to witness the very best of what it means to be human, and the incredible power of unconditional love. 6 months after Marcus Williams spoke 2 words that changed everything, the ripple effects of that moment continued expanding outward like waves from a stone dropped in still water. The video of Marcus saying, "Thank you to Rex," had been viewed over 50 million times across all platforms. But more importantly, it had sparked a movement that was transforming lives across the nation. The Marcus and Rex Foundation, established by the Williams family with donations that poured in from around the world, had already funded 12 new canine search and rescue units in underserved communities. Each unit was specifically trained in locating missing children with special needs, using protocols developed from Rex's successful techniques. The Foundation's motto, printed on everything from t-shirts to training manuals, was simple: every child deserves a hero. Dr. Sarah Chun had left her private practice to become the Foundation's director of autism research. Her groundbreaking study, Canine-Assisted Communication: Breakthroughs in Autism Spectrum Disorders, had been published in 3 major medical journals and was revolutionizing therapeutic approaches worldwide. Treatment centers from Australia to Sweden were implementing the Marcus Protocol, structured interactions between specially trained therapy dogs and nonverbal autistic children. We're seeing communication breakthroughs in 73% of participants, Dr. Chun explained to a packed auditorium at the International Autism Conference in Chicago. Children who haven't spoken in years are beginning to vocalize. More importantly, we're documenting measurable improvements in social engagement, anxiety reduction, and overall quality of life indicators. But perhaps the most profound changes were happening in the Williams household itself. Marcus, now 3.5, had evolved from a completely nonverbal child to someone who spoke in short, clear sentences always when Rex was present. His vocabulary had grown to over 200 words, each one celebrated by parents who had once been told their son might never communicate at all. "Rex, sit," Marcus commanded during their morning routine, his small hand pointing decisively. A German shepherd, now officially retired from active police duty to become Marcus's full-time companion and therapy partner, immediately complied. Rex wore a special vest identifying him as a certified autism service dog, though his bond with Marcus transcended any official designation. Officer Daniel Hayes, who had received national recognition for his role in Marcus's rescue, had been promoted to head the county's new Special Needs Search and Rescue Division. But he insisted that Rex remain primarily dedicated to Marcus, understanding that their connection was too valuable to interrupt for other duties. "Rex taught me something about service that I didn't learn in all my years of training," Hayes reflected during a recent interview. "Sometimes the most important work isn't catching criminals or solving cases. Sometimes it's sitting quietly beside a little boy who needs to know he's safe." The broader impact on autism awareness had been staggering. Funding for autism research had increased by 340% in their state alone. The Marcus effect, as researchers had begun calling it, had led to legislative changes requiring first responders to receive specialized training in autism-related emergencies. Police departments nationwide were requesting seminars on autism awareness, and emergency response protocols had been rewritten to accommodate the unique challenges of searching for missing individuals with developmental disabilities. Lisa Williams had returned to detective work, but with a dramatically different focus. She now headed the state's first missing persons with special needs task force, applying lessons learned from her son's ordeal to help other families navigate similar crises. Her expertise had already contributed to the successful recovery of 17 missing children with various developmental challenges. Every case is personal now, Lisa explained to new task force members during training sessions. When you're searching for someone's child, you're not just looking for a missing person. You're racing to preserve a family's future. The Williams family had also become inadvertent advocates for autism acceptance. Their carefully controlled media appearances, always with Rex present to keep Marcus calm, had helped millions of people understand autism not as a tragedy to be fixed, but as a different way of experiencing the world that deserved respect and accommodation. Marcus's development continued to astound professionals. His latest milestone had occurred just 2 weeks earlier during a routine therapy session. When asked what he wanted to be when he grew up, Marcus had looked directly at Rex and stated clearly, "Help people like Rex helps me." The therapy session video, shared with permission, had gone viral again, not for its novelty, but for its profound message about the transformative power of compassion and connection. Educational institutions had also been impacted by Marcus's story. Cedar Creek Elementary School had implemented the state's first comprehensive autism inclusion program, with specially trained therapy dogs working alongside teachers to support students with special needs. The program's success had led to replication in over 200 schools across the country. Perhaps most remarkably, Marcus had begun showing signs of developing what Dr. Chon termed empathic communication skills, an ability to sense when other children were distressed and to seek out Rex to provide comfort. During recent visits to the Children's Hospital, Marcus had independently guided Rex to the bedsides of young patients, somehow understanding that they needed the same healing presence that had transformed his own life. "He's becoming a healer," Dr. Chon observed during Marcus's latest evaluation. "The child who couldn't communicate is now facilitating communication for others." It's unprecedented in autism research. As the sun set over Cedar Creek on this particular evening, Marcus sat in his backyard sandbox, the same sandbox where his extraordinary journey had begun. Rex lay beside him, patient and watchful as always, while Marcus arranged his toy police cars in careful patterns. But now, those patterns included toy ambulances, fire trucks, and rescue helicopters, a child's representation of the army of heroes who had brought him home. "Rex," Marcus said suddenly, looking up from his toys with the serious expression that always preceded his most important communications. "Thank you for saving me." The German shepherd's tail wagged once, slowly, as if acknowledging not just the words, but the miracle they represented. In that quiet moment, surrounded by the ordinary magic of an autumn evening, boy and dog continued their silent conversation, proof that love truly can transcend any barrier, heal any wound, and transform any heart willing to receive it. The ripples continued spreading outward, carrying hope to families who had lost it, bringing healing to children who needed it, and reminding a world grown cynical that miracles still happen. Sometimes they just come with 4 legs, amber eyes, and an unlimited capacity for unconditional love.